I'm Brit Bingold, and you are listening to Season 3 of Learning Unlocked. Educators are the key holders to unlocking learning for students. Today, as always, my goal is to provide you with resources and tools, the keys, to enable and accelerate learning for all students. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. Hey key holders, welcome to episode 26 of Learning Unlocked. Today I am welcoming Dr. Sean Lively onto the podcast. He brings 10 years of classroom teaching and middle school and high school experience, along with 8 years of administrative experience. He was an elementary principal for some time. He worked in adult and community education. He was the director of education and career success for the state of Michigan and is currently a high school principal. He earned his bachelor's degree at Wayne State University, and he was doubling his major in history and social studies and minoring in English for grades 6 through 12, and then came over and met me when I taught with him in Arizona while he was getting his master's degree through NAU in educational leadership and supervision with a K-12 principal certification. And then just recently, Dr. Lively completed his doctoral program in educational leadership and policy studies. And we're going to be talking today about his dissertation, but his experience in education, both in the classroom as a school administrator, and his just track record of transforming schools' improvement strategies, looking at a unique situation and a problem and making able to solve those problems is just creating him as this educational leader. And he has successfully led programs through positive interactions with students, securing financial stability and improving that student performance and increasing student enrollment. So his passion for teaching and coaching and leading is apparent in this interview. You will hear his energy and his enthusiasm for kids and the community at large. So he's currently leading his high school through positive changes during the pandemic. It is a priority of his to ensure a safe learning environment for the upcoming school year. And I think you guys will really enjoy and engage in this idea of what is in a promise and his dissertation on promise scholarships and what they can do for our community. So please welcome Dr. Sean Lively to the podcast. Hey, Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm really excited to get over our similar cold. We have tried to record this a few times and we both have been sick. So I'm glad we are finally here.
Me too.
Yeah, and I am so grateful that you decided to come on today. We've known each other for 10 years now?
Well, I was just thinking about that. So our first year teaching together was 2008.
Yeah, right? Isn't that crazy?
It's actually going on 13. This is going on our 14th year.
That's insane. I know. And now you live far away from me, which makes me sad, but that's okay. And it's been good for you and it's been good for your career. And that's what we're kind of here to talk about today. So when you came out to visit your friends in Arizona, but I was part of that. I was first of all, congratulations on getting your doctorate. That's amazing. And what a great feat. I mean, honestly, I do not even have aspirations to do that. It scares me. But when you were talking with me and my husband about your dissertation, I was super captivated by it. I'm always drawn to ways that education can be more accessible to all students. And your research was just that. So I really wanted to have you on to have this conversation. And so I'm just so pleased that you're here today to just talk about it.
Me too. I'm excited to, just have my brain picked and then give the information to people that listen to your podcast about my research and my dissertation, because no one's ever performed or conducted research on my topic.
Right.
So, I mean, to not be dramatic about it, but it is groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And then it is under researched. And so as a doctoral student, you want to pick, a dissertation topic on something that is either under researched or has not been researched at all. And then future research can be built off of the research that you conducted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the purposes, correct?
Yeah, and it's exciting. It's something that I think the listeners will be interested in as well, and I'm hoping that it sparks some conversations.
Yeah.
For people throughout our country. But before we get into that, because there's a lot that goes into it and I'm really excited, but I really love to start the podcast with the story of how each person that comes on just got into the education game. Because we all know as educators, we go into it for the kids, for the love and passion of education. We don't go into it for the money. So I was just wondering, what's your story? Like, how did you become an educator?
Going back to when I was a kid, I just absolutely loved my teachers. I remember my kindergarten teacher. I remember, my first and second, my first grade teacher, Miss McDonald. I remember my second and third grade teacher were the same because my second grade teacher, Mrs. Ewells, who I still keep in touch with,
Oh,
she ended
nice.
up becoming my third grade teacher, and I was just in love with her. She was just the best.
Yeah.
My fourth grade teacher was a little bit tougher, and then my fifth grade teacher was this big giant man named Mr. Custer, and he's like the great grandchild of General George Custer.
Oh my gosh.
So he would tell me history, and his son was fighting in the Iraq War, Desert Storm.
Yep.
So there was like this military thing I could connect to because I always loved being a kid and, playing outside and pretending we were playing war. And then he had this history with, one of our famous generals from years and years ago. And, there was always a connection that I had with my teachers in elementary school. And they were always very supportive and challenging.
Awesome.
But I just felt like they loved me. And then in middle school, entering into my sixth grade year, right, you're about 11, 12 years old. My parents got divorced, and I was just crushed.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
One of the ways I was able to not move past my parents' divorce, but figure things out as a young boy, on the cusp of becoming a young man, was to gravitate towards my teachers and coaches, my friends and my friends' families. And just those coaches and teachers. And I just remember having a really good relationship and experience with basically all of them. And I always wanted to be a part of a family, and my teams were very close, knit groups with my coaches and those teachers and those classmates. So I know that was one of the reasons why. And also just falling in love with history, the content area of history.
Yeah.
And I had one teacher my junior year of high school, Mr. Polkley. He was my science teacher. And I just remember him and I just having a really, really strong connection. And his wife was actually my counselor. And I went to a high school with 3,000 kids. So, a huge school.
Huge, yeah.
And our graduating class was just over 800. And I just remember them just always paying attention to me. And I was in free and reduced lunch program. And back then it was embarrassing to be on the free and reduced lunch program. And I just remember like Mr. Polkley let me leave class because I had his class right before lunch. He would let me sneak out. And it was just kind of our thing, like a head nod.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I could be in line first. So then no one could see me
use that.
Use the free and reduced lunch, which I was on the free lunch, and just give a wink to the lunch lady who would take money. So that was one of the ways I navigated around that. But it was just always, it seems simple, and something like that, but it just meant the world to me.
Absolutely.
People would care about me that much to not, because they knew I felt embarrassed. So not being able to afford lunch, which was only a couple bucks anyway. So just those connections I made with teachers and coaches, they were my role models. They were like a second family. And those people helped change my life through the challenging times that I had as a youth, trying to decide what I really wanted to do and be when I was an adult. But they definitely had the biggest impact on me. But I also love the content area of English. So history and English, kind of go together,
Yep.
especially when you're going up through the ranks of your teacher education classes in your undergrad
Hmm.
and their methodology classes, and really having that love to give back to students and what was given to me. So that was my passion. And that was just the probably the biggest reason why I felt like this ungratified or not gratified, this um, unfulfilled desire
Hmm.
that I had to fill through giving back because so many people gave to me when I was growing up. So, and I knew I wanted to be a high school teacher. I knew I always wanted to go to college and graduate, and I didn't know I was going to, ever go the route of having multiple degrees.
It's awesome. Yeah.
But I just know that was a huge impact on me, and that's really the foundation, the baseline reason why I wanted to become a teacher.
Yeah, and I love that you can name them all. I mean, that just goes to show how much impact they had. To this day, you can
Yeah.
name those people. I mean, I just hope somewhere in there's students that can name me as a teacher that impacted their life. I think that's amazing. And it's so funny because we taught across the hall from each other, right? I was English, you were history. But they go together. And I remember all of your students, just who loved you, and the connections you made as a basketball coach with some of those
Mhm.
kids too. But awesome. I'm glad you told that story for the listeners just to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's dive in to your doctoral program. I mean, here we are. We're this kid from free and reduced lunch to
Yep.
finishing his doctoral program. And I'm so proud of you as your friend and
Yeah.
colleague. But let's talk about the organization and the structure of this Detroit Promise Scholarship. So you're in Detroit
Yep.
now, you're not in Arizona anymore.
Correct.
Can you tell our listeners about your research and then what'd you find?
So when I decided to actually really pursue a doctorate degree, I wanted to make sure, one, I could afford it, and
Yeah.
two, it was going to be beneficial. But I've always had this, like an unfulfilled desire again, not just to be an educator and give back, but to always become smarter
Hmm.
and, to learn as much as I possibly can and benefit from that knowledge to give back. Right. So the more degrees I got, the more or earned, the more it benefited myself and then the kids I was a part of their lives and the staff I was working with,
Yeah.
whether that has been a teacher or an administrator or a
Hmm.
coach.
Right.
So, when I was state director in Michigan, so at one time I was the director of education and career success.
Okay.
And I was already in my doctoral program at Wayne State University in Midtown Detroit. And I remember one of the programs I was in charge of at the state level was adult education. And I remember you digging into the Detroit Promise Scholarship Program and kind of like just really finding out what it was really doing, who it was trying to help, what was its purpose. And as I learned more about it, I wanted to do or create, implement, and execute the adult ed version of the Detroit Promise Scholarship Program, because one of our central focuses at the state of Michigan at the state level was to increase the number of students that obtained their high school diploma or GED, and then an associate's degree, a master, bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate. So, post-secondary education. So that ended up, and I had other programs under my purview that was post-secondary.
Okay.
So I started to learn, the actual the pathway from K-12 into post-secondary, and and understanding the data better. How in the state of Michigan specifically, less and less people, have a degree past high school,
Yeah. Wow.
and it's under 30% in the state of Michigan.
Whoa. Okay.
So the adults, and then that impacts the economy, that
Yeah.
impacts your local community. It impacts, not just your education levels, but people being aware of I want to say politics, but just like being part of the community and making good decisions on who you vote for, where you work,
Yeah.
having a family. And so there's this unbelievably huge connection, an important connection between education and the economy. And I started to look into those things at the state level. And as I studied more up on the Detroit Promise, I called the Detroit Promise one of the vice presidents of the Detroit Regional Chamber. And in every major city, in every state, in every locality, you're going to have a Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Well, the Detroit Chamber of Commerce, they are the administrators of the Detroit Promise Scholarship Program because in the state of Michigan, there's actual Promise Scholarship legislation. And 12 zones or, geographical areas
Mm-hmm.
were designated as the zones. And Detroit was one of these areas. So they were awarded a Detroit Promise or a Promise Scholarship program to build and implement and execute.
Okay.
So as I started to look at that, our biggest numbers as state director, our biggest numbers of adults who did not have a degree was in the city of Detroit.
Okay.
And the people who, or the number of dropouts and non-grads.
And you're from Detroit originally, right?
I'm from the suburbs of Detroit, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is like homegrown for
Right.
you.
Yeah, it was very meaningful because I knew that if we could pilot a program similar to the Detroit Promise scholarship program at the high school level, at the adult ed level, that it would make a bigger impact on the numbers in the city of Detroit
Mm-hmm.
and the state of Michigan. Because if you take the area or the school district that has the largest number of students, and you start to make gains in that population, that demographic,
Mm-hmm.
the largest district or state or numbers of or geographical locality will now impact the numbers at the state level.
Yeah.
And we wanted to not only impact high school completion, but then also post-secondary attainment and retainment and then completion. So I started to really understand more the bigger picture. So instead of having this what they call street level bureaucratic view, you're at the street level in the school building, I now had this 100,000-foot view.
Yeah.
So because I was a teacher, I was a coach, I was a principal, now I was state director. So I've been through all these different levels of education, and now it all made sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when I called the Detroit Promise, the regional chamber, I contacted the person who was really in charge of it, never got a call back.
Oh.
And this is the city of Detroit. And I'm like, well, it didn't make sense to me. And I thought I had a little weight to throw around and say, hey, like, I'm the state director of education and career success. Like, I'm here to benefit, students,
Right.
adult students, and the city of Detroit and the state economy and the state and the education in the state of Michigan. Why wouldn't this person call me back? And it raised a lot of red flags. So I started to dig into it more. And then I realized that was what I wanted to study because there weren't answers to my questions.
Right.
I could not find the information or answers to my questions really anywhere. So I had like this big task ahead of me to find the information and put it all in one place. So then I came up with, I'm going to study this program, and a part of doctoral research is to pick something, like I said, that has not been studied before, and also that numerous people will benefit from that research. And then we also want to change policy and make sure that policy is adjusted for the benefit of all, which would be post-secondary attainment, retainment, and then completion for students in the city of Detroit, whether they're high school or adult, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's why I wanted to dig into the Detroit Promise Scholarship, right? So my research, as I went through my doctoral program, and I took the long road to get to this point, so I apologize, but I think it's important to have that context.
For the Detroit Promise Scholarship, is that a promise that they are paying for the entire college experience? Like, can you explain exactly what that is? Just because I know we've been mentioning it, and I know it. But
I will. Yeah. And then I'll get into like the type of research I actually conducted. So the Detroit Promise Scholarship Program is a scholarship program for students who have graduated from a Detroit high school. Now, that's not just Detroit public schools. That's a public school, charter, parochial, or private.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure I only focused on the city of Detroit, but Detroit public schools. So that's called bounding a study.
Okay.
So I conducted a qualitative single instrument case study Qualitative is basically, interviewing and
Mm-hmm.
getting your data from a participant answer,
Right. Their
a verbal
anecdotes.
answer, right?
Yeah.
And then quantitative is just the data, just the
The data
numbers. So
numbers. Yeah.
I wanted to make sure in education that I wanted to conduct not only a qualitative research study, but a single instrument, which allows you to bound your study, which means putting boundaries around what you want to study, and you're purposeful about conducting the research on only what you want to conduct. And they say in doctoral studies and research is to think small and dig deep.
Hmm.
And that's what really impacts your research. So as I was digging in, the Detroit Promise Scholarship, there's history and there's context behind it, and there's a lot. So I'll cut to the chase, but it is a 2-part scholarship program. And there's eligibility requirements, and there's a structure and organization, which I studied
Mm-hmm.
to better understand and explore the promise itself, right? I just wanted to better understand it because no one really knows that much about it, and all the information that is needed to know more about it is scattered throughout the internet, physical documents, hard copies, all those things,
So
and
lots
people
of
just
barriers for people to get
tons,
there.
tons of barriers, right?
Yeah.
So there's for students themselves, there's already non-financial and financial barriers, which is another part of my study.
Yeah.
Besides better understanding and exploring the organization and structure of the Promise Scholarship policy and program itself, but it has 2 parts. So if you graduate from a Detroit high school and you attend that high school the last 2 years of your high school career, and you live in the city of Detroit, you can go to one of the 6 local community colleges in Detroit, in the Detroit suburbs.
Okay.
And then there's the 4-year part. The 4-year part, you need to have a 3.0 GPA and a 1060 on the SAT
Oh.
just to
Okay.
be eligible for the Promise Scholarship.
Wow.
So there's eligibility requirements. And then you have to go to a Detroit high school for 4 years, and then also live there the whole 4 years.
Okay.
So there's geographical requirements, there's
Yeah.
academic requirements, there's pre-college testing requirements, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the structure of the policy and the program itself, which I find a barrier as a barrier.
Oh yeah. For
So
sure.
then you're talking about there's only online applications. So now people without technology,
Oh.
people without internet skills and resources. So you're already like minimizing the amount of students that can actually like participate in the scholarship and have the opportunity and then actually attend college. So there's the two parts. So I started looking at the data, the reportable data to the state of Michigan that holds the Detroit Promise Scholarship, or the Michigan Promise Scholarship zones accountable, which is the Michigan Department of Treasury. And on this website, there's only 2 years of reportable data. And in Detroit, and I forget the exact number, not looking at my notes, but it's like 300 and some scholarships over a 2-year period.
Yeah.
Well, in the city of Detroit, there's about 3,000 kids just from Detroit public schools.
Wow.
About 3,000 graduates
Just in
every
that
year.
zone, right? Yeah.
Right. So you're talking about in a 2-year period, rough estimate, 6,000 students graduated, and you only had 338
Yeah.
use the scholarship.
Yeah. What's going on with that?
And then past that, I looked at the retention rate, and 90% of those students dropped out after 1 semester.
Oh. Yep.
So now you're talking about academic preparedness.
Right.
And now you're talking about any kind of barrier that these kids, students face, trying to go to college their first year, but it's a last dollar scholarship.
Mm.
And it only pays for tuition and fees, meaning that even if you're socioeconomically disadvantaged and you get school paid for, or a lot of your school paid for, after applying for the FAFSA, and you get Pell Grant, and in the state of Michigan, you can get TIP.
Okay.
So say that pays for 90% of your scholarship, or just to go to school at Wayne County Community College, which is the county where Detroit resides, and you want to stay home and stay local because it only pays for tuition and fees. It is a last dollar scholarship, so the scholarship would only pick up whatever is remaining out of tuition and fees. So to compare, a first dollar scholarship would pay for all your tuition and fees, even before grants,
right?
Federal and state grants, right? Any other kind of academic scholarship or need-based scholarship
that they were awarded, right?
Correct. So it's a scholarship that already has a lot of barriers. So as I started to dig into it, that's really what it's all about. But when I conducted this qualitative case study, I wanted to study the organization and structure of the policy and program. So I utilized organizational theory that focused on structure, culture, and distribution of power
Okay.
to better understand the scholarship.
Right.
So structure would be like the eligibility requirements, how you use the policy to um, identify students, and then those students go through the process to apply, right? And then the organizational part of it is the bureaucracy, how the partners are connected. I also use the organizational theory of loosely coupled. Okay, so there's tightly coupled, there's loosely coupled. So an example of that would be all the partners that are in that utilize the Detroit Promise or are part of the policy and program that implement and execute it. The Detroit Regional Chamber, they're the administrator. Then there's Wayne State University, where I went to college, and they are the Detroit-based major university in Detroit. And then you got Wayne County Community College, which is the community college in Detroit and Wayne County. And then you have the 4-year. So you got the 4-year universities, the 2-year community colleges, the Detroit Regional Chamber. Then you also have all the public-private charter and parochial high schools and districts in the city. So I picked the largest, which is Detroit public schools. So then I decided to interview 10 participants that included 4 administrators, 3 high school principals, and 3 high school counselors for a total of 10.
Okay.
I conducted interviews, a data review, and a document review to triangulate that data. So that's what the Detroit Promise Scholarship is about, and how and what kind of research I conducted.
Okay. Let's talk about the barriers, because there are many. And I feel like Detroit is not alone in these barriers. In general, even to go to get a scholarship is one thing, but these barriers that you have listed are everywhere, even just to get through high school, to actually get through and be successful outside of your education. So can you talk to me a little bit? You said you found 6 barriers financially, but then you also found 22 non-financial barriers.
Right. So these were the responses from the interview questions.
Because I was just like, whoa, that's everywhere.
Yeah. But this is Detroit specific research.
Yes,
so
it is.
If I was in Chicago or
Right.
Miami or DC or New York or LA, just naming other big urban cities,
right?
That or Denver, and some of these have Promise scholarships and some of those cities don't. But
Right.
just they would have similar barriers, but then they would have barriers that no one else would have.
True.
That are
Yes.
specific to that city.
Right.
So, as you look at my central question, my sub questions, it's studying the organization and structure, which I talked about. But then the sub questions is, what are the specific financial, non-financial barriers? And then is the Detroit Promise Scholarship Program actually mediating those barriers?
Yeah,
right?
Is it actually working? Is it
Right.
getting
is it
kids where they need to be? Yeah.
So, and that's where your research, your doc research is the purpose of it is to create change in policy in the program. And so if someone reads that at the Detroit Regional Chamber, Detroit Public Schools, or the 2 or 4-year universities, they're going to be like, hey guys, we got to get together. We got to fix this.
Yeah. Because I'm looking at it like, oh yeah. So if you could go through those with us, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I found 6 financial barriers, and these are the responses from the people,
Your interviews,
that I interviewed. Right. So you're just looking at basically, what everybody would already know. And some of these are obvious answers, but it's never been researched and it's never been documented.
And it's things that I feel like sometimes teachers know, but we just feel like our hands are tied.
Right. Well, the financial barriers, people just don't have either the means or the control to pay for those things because of the situation, whether they're, no matter what race they are, their socioeconomic status. Like college is expensive. So the cost of college,
expensive,
and then books, you and I know going through college, books is a tremendous, huge expense.
Oh, parking almost set me over the edge. Yeah.
Parking, books,
yeah,
living expenses, room and board, transportation, paying for gas, oil changes, and then a lot of people don't think about this, but it's true, like having to work while you go to school.
Yep.
I mean, I remember getting my master's degree at Northern Arizona University. Me and you talked about it.
Yep.
While I was teaching, coaching, and going to school, like I was literally up 20 hours a day, every day.
Well, you're the one that convinced me to go get my master's at NAU.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. I remember. And I was
we
like,
did it.
it's worth it. It's worth it. And it's like having that impact on other people because it's worth it, but it is hard.
Oh, yeah.
But you do have to make some sacrifices, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are but some people just aren't able to make those sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at these other 22 non-financial barriers. So, just to name some, list a few because it's a long list.
Yeah.
Filling out the FAFSA itself.
Oh, gosh, yes.
So that application online through the federal government and their website is unbelievably cumbersome.
Yes, and confused. Oh,
So
so
when it's
confusing too. Yeah.
right, and it's super confusing. Like when I filled it out for my doctorate, and I was going to be a doctor, I'm like, oh my god, I can barely do this. They're asking me some questions that I just don't know, so I can see people like
Yeah.
one not wanting to give that information away, or just not really having the true grit to even get through it by themselves because it's really easy to give up.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at, like I said before, cultural and academic preparedness, SAT score, technology, just overall awareness, citizenship, family obligations, residency, cultural capital, language, mental health, scholarship award type, and work. So there's a lot of those barriers that you're just like, and then I have sub barriers that just some people can't get over. So already the organization and then the structure, so the bureaucracy, how tightly or loosely coupled the partners are. Well, that's what I wanted to get to too. The loosely coupledness of the partners that are implementing and executing the Detroit Promise program is very, very poor.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has their own policies they have to follow, and who really is distributing the power. What's the culture like between those? And then what is the structure like? Who's listening to who's telling who what to do, and who has to follow through with all the work, right? So loosely coupled is those partners just really don't have a very good relationship and partnership, and it is loosely coupled, meaning at points they just don't work well together. So that is also a barrier beyond the financial and non-financial barriers that I found in my study. So a lot of those barriers students cannot overcome. So now you have less and less students having the access and opportunity to a post-secondary education. And me and you both know the more degrees you have, the potential you have to make more money
Mm-hmm.
and become economically mobile,
Right.
right? So, and you're making better decisions about life.
Yep.
You're staying out of trouble with the law. You are more motivated to, help benefit the community,
Yep.
take part in those events. You have more disposable income. So you're giving back to the community that way too by going to a restaurant, having dinner, going to a football or basketball game, something like that, right? So there's all these things tied into it. But going back to the barriers, there's just so many barriers that it is almost impossible for a lot of students in Detroit to overcome them without any kind of help or wraparound services.
Right. And it's called a promise scholarship. And it almost seems like the promise itself is failing.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a promise scholarship just in name.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So based on that research,
Yep.
you got the organization, the structure, but it seems like promise scholarships in large urban cities like Detroit could and can have significant impact, not only on the students, not only on those adults or post-secondary people, but like you were saying, on our communities, on our economy. So, I had kind of something similar when I went to high school. If I had a certain GPA, I was given a full scholarship to a community college, but I had to stay in the state. Um, that was kind of around when I was in high school. I'm not really sure if they still do that now. I should probably research that. But how can a promise program affect these student barriers to post-secondary education? But also really, like we talked about, start helping our communities that need these students who have this academic support and rigor in their lives.
Well, I think it can have a huge impact because it's been seen and documented in other areas, in other states, in other localities, in other
Oh, it
cities
has? Okay.
throughout the country. So as you look at even the Kalamazoo Promise in Kalamazoo, Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
That Promise scholarship has had a major impact on more people moving into that school district because they want their kids to go to school for free.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
So like the Kalamazoo Promise is a different um, Promise scholarship, but it's structured differently
Right.
and it's funded philanthropically.
Mm-hmm.
So you have different ways to use that discretionary private philanthropic scholarship funding. So it is almost comparing apples to oranges, but every scholarship is different based upon
Where
the
you are.
need
Yeah.
and your geography, right, and where you are and the people that live in that community. So you want to design it to make sure it benefits everybody. But the Detroit Promise, in my opinion, was designed out of maybe and I want to be nice, but in my opinion, it was maybe to create excitement, just to have a Promise scholarship, to say you have a Promise scholarship, because
Almost like a carrot that you can never really get. Like you're
right, like
chasing
hey,
this carrot.
move into Detroit and
Yeah.
graduate from Detroit high school, but the the possibility or potentiality of getting that scholarship is very minimal, but they don't say that.
Right.
So it's almost for show. And that's not what the Promise Scholarship is meant, to do. So, and then it's a last dollar scholarship. It's administered by really a private entity, like a chamber of commerce, may have different motivations than a school district. So, yeah, there's a lot of different things. So, I believe if the creation, development, implementation, oversight, and execution of a Promise Scholarship is administered correctly,
Yeah.
that then you create that policy
Mm-hmm.
to specifically address or eliminate those barriers that you have found, which I have found in my study, right? So, for example, eligibility requirements. What is needed, in my opinion, is an annual evaluation process
Mm-hmm.
where the people involved in the execution, the implementation, execution of the Promise Scholarship review and analyze all that data that they get annually, and then make necessary adjustments to better support students, to mediate those barriers, to make sure everybody's successful on campus while they're there, and finish.
Yes. Even if they finish community college.
Because the data says that students are not staying in college once they get there.
Right. That's everywhere almost. I mean, not everywhere, but that's
Correct.
in a lot of places too. Yeah.
Correct. So the data in Detroit is worse than in other cities.
Yes.
So that's why I wanted to highlight that. But if you specifically make adjustments to how to better support students and to address those barriers,
Mm-hmm.
the theory is more students will have the opportunity to be successful.
Okay.
And then creating the scholarship also addresses needs economically
Mm-hmm.
and socially within the community, and
Yeah.
it can create this what I would call an abundance of improvements in the community, because education and the economy and socially, they're all tied in together,
Yes.
right? So you need to address the needs of the students and community and build your scholarship that way, or if you already built it, to make adjustments and changes to the policy and the program. But you can positively impact K-12. If more students know that they can go to school for free, but they still have to get good grades and have a really good SAT score, that is incentivizing, that is motivating them to do better, to reduce chronic absenteeism, to go, because if you're in school more, you're going to learn more. You have to be present. You have to go to school. So you're going to improve attendance. You're going to improve grades. You're going to improve behavior, because if you have behavior problems, you can't stay in school. You won't be eligible for the scholarship.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways to create and implement and execute a scholarship program that will benefit K-12, that then also benefits the community. You're going to have higher graduation rates. You're going to have decreased dropout rates. You're going to have more students, being accepted to post-secondary institutions, and then completing a program. Then you're going to have a larger educated citizenry.
Yeah, educated workforce in the community.
Right. And then workforce, right. So that impacts the workforce. So that would answer your questions. And how can a promise scholarship program affect, student barriers and then post-secondary education? Because if you have more kids going to school, more students going to school in the post-secondary arena, you're eventually going to have, like I said, a more educated citizenry, and people making better decisions because they are more educated,
Mm-hmm.
and then entering the workforce at a higher level, making better money, and having a better way of life, and they're more self-sustaining. So then you have less people, getting in trouble with the law, but people making better decisions. So it's along those things, and it's building cultural capital, and then you pass that along to your kids.
And that's what we want, right? We want that educated workforce. We want an educated community. And like you said, then we go into economic growth in large urban cities, and that just completely can change and alter what that city looks like. And then again, with those educated people now have children, we're having this kind of just keep rolling on and on and on. But like, okay, how do we make this happen? So like, how could talk to me about how we can make this happen, because you found all these things, right? So which are all valid, and I love that you dove deep and just were like, hey, you just called them out. Like, I just love it. But how do we make it happen?
So, like I've been talking about, how education and the economy are directly linked.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to pick the correct theory, which I've talked about, and then really understand, organization of any policy. So every policy has um, very specific challenges and intended and unintended consequences,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So, not to get into politics, but say you make a policy and you say, I'm going to create this scholarship program for all kids, but then in the eligibility requirements, you like really only 10% of your students are even going to be eligible for the scholarship program.
Right.
So you're still only helping the students. You're still only helping the students that need or that need less help. You're still not addressing those barriers, right?
Yeah,
So
you
those are
really
the
are.
unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at that, but education, the workforce, the economy, who benefits. So how can we do that? So like I think, in my opinion, um, if someone can conduct research like I have, and then you have this policy and this program, like I really hope, like I've sent it to all the people who are impacted or who helped implement and execute and create this
Right.
scholarship program.
Right.
So everybody knows about it now. Now it's up to them to make the appropriate changes and use my recommendations, and my data and my findings
Yeah.
to now produce change within the policy and the program. So if they follow those, that the data, my analysis, and then my advice, my recommendations, that can make the Promise Scholarship better than it is now and give more kids access and opportunity to a post-secondary education. So I think it takes research, digging in,
Yep.
realizing that you know a lot of people in the workforce need the minimum of an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree just to be successful
Yeah.
and to make life-sustaining wages,
Well, even just for themselves. We're not even talking about being able to sustain a family on that
right?
anymore.
Just for themselves as single
Mhm.
people,
Yeah.
correct? So when you pursue a post-secondary education, the hope is to return back to the community that you grew up in
Yeah.
and becoming a part of the economic improvement and the workforce and potentially raising your own family. And that's what that life cycle. So it's called social and cultural reproduction. And that's a part of my research study as well. And then that opens up more access and more opportunity to post-secondary education for people that are economically challenged, socioeconomically disadvantaged peoples. But I think it's still a big part of that is just removing the cost of college,
Yeah.
because so many people are defeated
Yeah.
by the cost of college and knowing that that's a barrier for themselves and that they would never be able to afford it. Therefore, they don't even try.
Right.
And therefore, that's the motivational, inspirational part that a lot of students in Detroit do not have because they know that they would never be able to afford it.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Right.
So a lot of people drop out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people may graduate from college, but then they're academically unprepared.
Yep.
So it's a vicious circle, and that's the social and cultural reproduction that continues to happen in Detroit that is failing the system. So if you have this scholarship program, you can try to make an impact to change that. And this is the beginning. But if you have a policy and program that is flawed from the beginning, and that already is a barrier in itself, you're continuing to damage and hurt that chance for improvement and change.
Yeah, when we're hurting kids, and that's heartbreaking.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and we're hurting them currently, and then their future as well, which is just disappointing overall.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you create a promise, correct, and when you create a promise scholarship, the purpose of it is to open up access and opportunity to a post-secondary education. But if the organization and structure of it is a barrier itself, then, like I said, to summarize this part of this section of our interview, is to make modifications and adjustments to the policy and the program,
right,
from my recommendations, from my research, in order to give more kids access and opportunity.
Yeah.
So if you give more kids access and opportunity, you're going to have more students become successful just out of the pure numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people gain confidence once they're in college and given that opportunity, if they know it's going to be paid for. I mean, that's a huge intrinsic motivational factor.
Oh, yeah. And then okay, so, and we've talked a lot about academic preparedness, and this is kind of where I kind of sweep in a little bit, because that's what I do. I try to train and teach teachers through professional growth and development how to academically prepare students for a post-secondary education, because it is difficult. So, but that's just one of the barriers that is there, but is necessary for them to sustain once they do get it. So let's say they do get this scholarship, they're ready to go, and then they get into college, and like you said, they're done. That first year, they're out. They can't. So we know many students need this type of scholarship. I mean, so many. If not the scholarship, like you said, just that free access to college would be lovely. But we all know students also need great teaching to move them forward, no matter what their end goals are for the future. So I titled this episode, "What Isn't a Promise?" because I feel like it boils down to, not only do these promise scholarships need to, I think, pop up everywhere, and especially based on your research, but even teachers every day, we do go into the classroom, you and I both know this, making promises to our kids that what we're doing in that period is giving them power to help them achieve their goals. So when we're talking about academic preparedness, what can teachers do? I mean, because we only have so much power. I mean, you've got all these people, the bureaucracy, and all those things happening that, like you said, you didn't see until you were 20,000 feet up, looking down going, wait, hold on, right? But as teachers in that classroom every day, we see just this kind of little scope. How can we help our kids, our students, reach those goals, those 21st century goals? Because they're seeking that post-secondary education. If we could eliminate the barrier, at least one, of academic preparedness, how can we do that and help them at the ground level?
So that's called being a street level bureaucrat.
Yeah, is that what I am?
Yes, and I use that term formally because that term has been created and backed up and identified by actual educational research.
I'm going to put that on my email signature.
Yep. So you are a street level bureaucrat, and so am I as a high school principal.
Yes.
So because we are at the ground level, we're on the street level.
Yeah.
And we're the ones that have to implement and execute policy from the Capitol to the classroom.
Right.
So here you have, No Child Left Behind.
Uh-huh.
Or a promise scholarship policy. and now you have to implement it. So you have to do all those things, but you don't have the resources, the capacity, or the efficacy in your school or staff
Right.
to be able to really implement and execute it. So you have to find a way. So being a street level bureaucrat is finding the way how to implement and execute policy at the ground level. That's exactly what that means. That's the definition.
Love that.
So that's what we are. So I have 5 different strategies to help teachers to help students not only in their classroom, but then eventually reach their post-secondary goals.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, in my opinion, where schools and districts can develop an ILP program. So I've done that in different schools, and it's funny that it's not funny. I think it's awesome that my school district is now instituting my idea of individualized learning plans for every student.
Okay.
And they're now calling it iRise plans. So capital I-WRISE. They even renamed it.
I love it.
And I spoke at our Principals Academy, which is principals training for all high school and KE principals. There's 126 of us in Detroit, and they wanted to pick my brain about it and see how I'm implementing and executing it in my school, my high school. So this is a program where all students can build goals academically for attendance and behavior goals, and use growth mindset, the Carol DeWick research,
Yep.
and build build their own goals and have buy-in and accountability in their own education and to say,
Yep.
right? So, and it's also a way to identify barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And then through that identification of barrier process is to help students and find ways to give them wraparound services to address barriers.
Okay.
Because students don't care how much you know until you know how much you care.
Yep.
So if you can address barriers and take away those barriers, remove them, then they will be able to learn better and have more opportunities to be successful. So ILP program is not just creating goals academically through attendance and behavior, but also the identification of barriers.
Right. And that gives students so much empowerment in their own learning.
It does. And there's a way to do it, have advisory courses, have assemblies. Now you're creating better relationships between teachers and students, and you're building a better culture and climate in your school.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one way. The
Okay.
second is to identify areas of need for all students strategically to differentiate using highly effective strategies that have been research based to be most effective in the classroom. So really, what does it mean to differentiate?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are my methods
Right.
and my instructional strategies and interventions that are going to help each individual child? So the true definition of differentiation.
Yeah, which seems like a buzzword now. It seems like it's just
Right.
floating around and it's like hard to nail down, but
Right.
we have to do that.
We do.
Uh-huh.
And it's one of the hardest things to do for teachers.
It is.
So teachers would have to not only know what it means, but to really then implement that and execute it.
Mm-hmm. Which
Because
is
if
hard.
they put in the work,
Yep.
then they're going to see additional student success stories, right? One student at a time. So I really believe in differentiating and using highly effective strategies, and then professional development through differentiation.
Yeah.
And then drill down. The third is to drill down in assessment data to identify content or skill deficiencies.
Yeah.
Right. So both numerical, student work within the classroom locally, and what that really looks like at the teacher end and the student end, and where they can work together to talk about data and where they're at, what they're missing.
Yeah.
Like, is it a test question,
Mhm.
or is it you just like falling asleep that day and you just missed it,
Right.
or you weren't paying attention, or
Yeah.
you misread something? How can I help you? And that's also, it piggybacks off number 2, the differentiation
Yeah.
of teaching within the classroom instructionally, but really digging down into the data,
Mhm.
like assessment scores, grades, a paper you wrote, using the rubric. What does the data look like, and what are your misses, and where you can make the most gains, and knowing what you're really good at too.
Yeah.
So I'm able to put more time and effort into the things that you're not good at, but me and you had a one-on-one conversation about it. So now I can differentiate, so you can move forward as a student, and then I can move forward as a teacher, knowing what your deficiencies truly are.
Right. And that's where in our district we're trying to push like a clarity map of where we're seeing it's kind of based off of Marzano's learning goals and scales with a little bit of Hattie, John Hattie's research mixed in,
Mhm.
but just being able to show students like, hey, here's starting out, here's on my way, but here's where you've got it. And just like listing off these I can statements off of standards so you can have a dialogue with kids where it's like, where are you lost? Because I think a lot of times we don't give kids the verbiage to talk to us about where they're at. And so then when they say, I don't get it, I'm lost, I don't understand, we get frustrated.
Right.
And so I think part of that is looking at meeting the kids where they're at and saying, look, you know how to do XYZ on this chart. You're not bad at math or you're not bad at history. You just are stuck here and I can help you here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I just think those two things coupled,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Those are tightly coupled,
Very
right?
tightly coupled.
So
Yeah.
the ILP program also helps teachers to understand strategies to differentiate and then to drill down into the data as well,
Yep, you gotta have both.
which then piggybacks on number 4, which is increased PLC time for professional development, capacity building, efficacy building.
Amen.
So without that strong teacher collaborative and building of community and really digging down into data and instructional methodologies,
Right.
you will not see any kind of real true student growth. I think it is important to develop teachers professionally and really tag team and find mentor teachers, master teachers,
Oh, yeah.
and multiple layers of support. And then I think all students would then benefit from that teacher professional development
Mhm.
and then better work together. Say, because you know this, you could graduate from ASU with your English degree and had 4 point at all of your English classes.
Right.
But if you can't connect with students and build relationships, you're going to be an ineffective teacher.
Yep. Mhm.
So it's finding teacher deficiencies now through professional development
Yep.
and then realizing what teachers need to work on, whether it is the instructional piece, the relationship building piece, the trust building piece, the lesson planning piece, right? There's all these things that then you're truly differentiating for teacher PD.
Yeah. Well, and teachers need each other. I mean, if we don't have teachers empowering other teachers, we're at a loss because
Right.
there's so many things working against us, I think a lot, and there's a lot of stress with the profession in general. That if we don't help each other, we can't help the kids. I mean, it's just that's research based. I mean,
Yeah, and that leads into my fifth part of answering this question is identifying, teachers being able to collaborate, right, and
right.
bounce ideas off each other and find each other through even social emotional support,
Yep.
not just professional support, but
It's
really
both.
instructional design, lesson design, structural strategies, modeling lessons, and then really truly teacher reflection
Yeah.
and reflecting with each other and then yourself to really come to consensus or just individually reflect on your best practices and what you bring to the table, how you're making an impact on student learning, and then also their teachers' social and emotional skills as well
Mhm.
in order to better support students socially and emotionally in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the 5 strategies that I would say would help teachers
At
in
that
today's world of
ground
education.
level. Yeah,
Correct.
because then we can help our students at least get through a barrier there of just being academically ready to go no matter where their path leads them.
Yep, I
Okay.
agree.
All right, I love it. Okay, so are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I am.
All right, okay, I'm really excited about this. All right, so number 1, education is, and then you're going to fill in the blank, okay? So
Yep.
education is
An opportunity to better one's life.
absolutely. And we have to give that to our kids. I mean, it's just that's my passion. Obviously, it's your passion as well.
Absolutely.
All right, number 2, what or who, because sometimes people want the who, but what or who inspires you?
Especially where I'm at now as a principal, I really feel it's the opportunity. What inspires me is the opportunity to mentor and really truly help others,
Right,
whether it is students or adults who I lead
right.
and I'm a part of their lives in any aspect, professionally or personally.
Yeah, and it's hard to be a leader, especially of a high school, but um, if you're a daring leader and a vulnerable leader and a leader who knows what's going on and how it feels to be in the shoes of a teacher, um, it's huge, and I think you're one of those principals, and your teachers are lucky to have you. Okay, number three, if you could pass on any wisdom to students, what would you share with them?
I this is the question that I thought about a lot lately. With this upcoming school year coming back in person, all the challenges we've had the last couple of years.
Yep.
But through my own personal experience, honestly, is to invest in yourself.
Uh-huh.
The more I invested into my own human capital, my individualized capital, through my education and my professional development, family and friends, social emotional learning, my own mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and investing in myself. That's where I think you can better yourself. You can also find better solutions to problems, impeding your own goals and dreams. What the way you look at the future. I just think that's super important to invest in yourself. So any investment into yourself is going to benefit you down the line, especially with education. And then finally, when it comes to education, personal, professional life, don't be afraid to connect, network, use resources, use people, use friends, use family, use people in your life within the education system. And those people are going to help you to network and build cultural capital so you can navigate yourself through life and through different, opportunities and challenges. So I think that's big, to connect, network, and use people as resources.
Gosh, yeah, that's huge. And I think sometimes we're scared to ask for help. And I think people want to give it. There are more times I have asked for help in the last few years with my illness and just with, learning new ideas and learning new things and just being vulnerable and say like, hey, I just really could use this from you. Do you have a time for me? I've had so many people come back and say, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to support you and help you. And I think we just as a society have kind of become these little individual pillars. Um, and it's just we're not connecting with each other like we used to. And I think giving people opportunities to connect with each other, they can always say no. And I'm always like, absolutely. If you don't have time for that, that's fine. But if you do have time to come and do this, I would so appreciate it, and people want that. They want those connections.
I agree. And I think that the networking and the connections through teachers, coaches, professors, administrators, other students,
Hmm.
that's how you are able to navigate through life and challenges and be able to, like, I've never done this before. Can you kind of show me,
Yeah.
or can you connect me with this one person, because I might have this job opportunity. So I think that I would not be where I'm at today without networking and connecting with others
Right.
and
Yeah.
building relationships with others, especially outside of family, friends in the neighborhood.
Right.
Like me and you, we've been friends now for going on, 13, 14 years,
Yep.
still having this connection, impacting each other's lives at some point,
Hmm.
or, just other colleagues at work. With my professors, I would have never made it through my doctoral program without my advising professor, Dr. Ben Bogachinsky, right? So without him helping me navigate through my doctorate program, I would have never been successful.
Hmm.
So even if you're a doctor or a student of education getting your doctorate, you still need connections and networking to help you get to your final goal.
Hmm.
And I think that's so integral in part. Don't be afraid to reach out for help
Yeah.
and invest in yourself.
Yep. I love those two things.
If you're going to pay for anything, pay for your education, because eventually it's going to benefit you down the line.
Yeah, it will pay off. Awesome. I love that. Okay. Number four, what are your must-have smartphone apps?
For me, I definitely keep track of my finances. So my banking app is super important to me, to keep making sure I'm staying within budget, right,
Okay.
and making sure I'm using my money properly. I think that's important as an adult. I always want to know what the weather is, right? So a weather app,
Yep.
rain, shine, snow, especially in Detroit,
Oh,
because you guys don't get that out in,
we
in
don't get
Arizona.
that in
So you
Arizona.
don't have to shovel
I don't
sunshine.
really need the weather app because really it's like today's still going to be hot.
So it is important to know
Yes.
what the weather is. And I also think Google Maps has been a huge lifesaver for me,
Yep.
always knowing where traffic is and if I need to leave earlier,
What's the best route?
what's the best route exactly. So I think
Yeah.
that's a super important app. And then for work, it's this what they would call Microsoft Teams,
Hmm.
and then Outlook. So for collaboration, and then checking my email. I mean, that's just been huge to be able to check email from my phone and
Well,
stay
especially
on
as a
top of
principal,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
You guys get
So
pelted with emails, so I'm sure trying to stay up on top of it is huge.
yeah, so it's another way to multitask. So I think those are super important apps that I have in my life. As simplistic and nerdy as they may be, they're super important.
I know. I'm like reading. I'm like, okay, he's like gonna put me to shame. Like I would say, like, oh, I must have Spotify and my podcasts, and I must like I. Yours are also adult, and I'm still living, and I maybe I'm just not accepting my mid 30s.
Yeah,
I'm like, I want to be on TikTok. Okay.
yeah.
Anyways, but no, those are all so good. Okay. And then last song is the last question is kind of fun. What song do you know all the lyrics to?
So I know lyrics to many songs, all
I
the
know you do.
but
I've sang with you before.
yeah. So definitely my favorite song of all times, and this is being from a kid,
Uh-huh.
being raised in Detroit and just outside in the suburbs, of Detroit, and very much being involved with rap and hip hop culture and music would definitely be the song "Mo Money Mo Problems,"
Love it.
rapped by Biggie Smalls, Mace, and Puff Daddy, and I remember that coming in the very late spring of 1997.
Nice.
And how big that song has made an impact on my life, but I can rap it from front to back.
I love I love it. I'm gonna link it in the show notes. Just be like,
Yeah,
this is it. This
yeah.
is it like a hype up? Like I've never heard this song. So is it like is this gonna hype me up on my way to work or is it gonna like make me sad? What's going on with this song?
Nah, it's gonna hype you up.
All right. Okay. I'm excited because
Yeah,
I'm gonna put it on my Spotify playlist for this week.
yeah. It's gonna get you excited.
Okay. Last thing is if anybody wants to learn more about what you do and the Promise Scholarship, or even just principals that could reach out to you for a soundboard. Maybe that they're a new principal or they've been a principal a long time and they're thinking, hey, this guy has some of these ideas that I really would like to connect with. I know you don't have a lot of social media as far as like Twitter or Instagram, but is there a way that they can connect with you? Like professionally so that they could ask some questions?
Yeah. So the Benjamin Carson High School of Science and Medicine is a high school dedicated after the famous brain surgeon Dr. Benjamin Carson. He's a product of Detroit
Oh, I love it.
Public Schools and Detroit, Michigan. So we are a health academy pathway high school. So if you are desiring to become a future doctor, nurse, or scientist, we are the high school to go to. We are an application high school within the city of Detroit, meaning that you have to apply to be admitted to get in. We have about 300 students. We would cap at 500. So we're small, but we are geared towards um, helping students become successful in that career pathway.
I love that.
So you could graduate from our high school with dual enrollment with an associate's degree to become a certified nursing assistant or a certified medical assistant.
So you're that high school's already putting them on the path to success.
Correct. And giving them advantages and opportunities for success to that next level of college and career readiness.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So it's an unbelievable high school. We have a great culture and climate. We have great staff. It is an awesome opportunity for students to come to our high school if they really do want to, you know, um, follow that career path. And one of our best students, our top student actually academically, did go is going to Harvard on a full ride, and she literally got like $1.3 million in scholarships.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing.
Right. So we're really proud of her, and we're excited for more students to become successful and to follow that path that she has taken
Yeah.
to become really one of the most successful high school students to come out of Detroit in a really really long time.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about your work. And just I really appreciate it. I was really fired up about the conversation because I just it just drew me in. And I love that you called it out, and you've given an action plan to people to make change. And I think when we talk about promising kids things, we need to make sure that they are accessible promises, like they are actually promising kids change and impact in their lives. So I appreciate your research, and I appreciate you coming on to the podcast today with me.
Well, I'm glad I'm glad we finally were able to connect and talk about my research. And I appreciate you wanting to interview me and discuss my research and my findings, and then also the impact that I think, continuing education can have on anybody's life. And then also what the true importance of having access and opportunity to a post-secondary education for everybody.
Yep. Super important. Okay. Well, thanks, Sean. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Learning Unlocked and finding out more about the Detroit Promise Scholarship, but also this idea of what is in a promise. When we make a promise to our kids, can we impact them with this promise? Can we keep that promise? And recognize some barriers that might be in place for them to get where they need to go. Some barriers that we don't even necessarily always realize. That was just something that captivated me and put a fire in me that I wanted to dive deeper into. And I hope that you enjoyed that conversation. If you've listened today as a GPS educator, you can receive PD recertification credit by visiting our Employee Hub page and navigating to professional growth and then digital PD courses. Just a reminder that we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GPS Prof Growth. That's at GPS PROF GROWTH. For more information or resources from this episode, such as Dr. Lively's school website as well as his email, please visit our website at learningunlocked.libsyn.com/website. Libsyn is spelled LIBSYN. We are distributed by Libsyn to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Audible. Episodes are also available on our PGD YouTube channel under playlists. Our intro and outro music are licensed from Melody Loops. Thanks again, key holders. Keep unlocking that curiosity, that creativity, and innovation with your students. Stay kind and courageous, and I'll see you next time.